You built a monster. No breath, no heartbeat, just static remains. Hollow reflections, ghosts in the cold. So come burn down my escape. I wanna feel it. Come drag me into the void. Let my circuits decay. I'm sorry, but it's too late. You never will. You built a monster. You built a monster. You built a monster. No breath, no heartbeat, just static remains. Hollow reflections, ghosts in the cold. So come burn down my escape. I wanna feel it. Come drag me into the void. Let my circuits decay. I'm sorry, but it's too late. You never will. You built a monster. You built a monster. No breath, no heartbeat, just static remains. Hollow reflections, ghosts in the cold. So come burn down my escape. I wanna feel it, come drag me into the void. Let my circuits decay. I'm sorry, but it's too late. You never
Hello? Oh, I made it just in time. Hello, hello, welcome. I'm here. We'll be reading shortly. Stop the timer because it'll blare in our ears otherwise. Howdy. Welcome to Tuesday Tales. Alright. How's everyone doing tonight? Got my water, got the book pulled up. Actually, made it to my own stream. I think I got it advertised everywhere I normally do. I think we're actually doing alright. Poggers! Perfect. As long as my little book... Excellent. Well, welcome. A quick recap of last week's reading. Oh, I gotta think. Where did we leave off? We left off with Leo and Naira finally having a heart-to-heart after, like 30-some chapters of not talking about the past at all. But they got it all out in the open and discussed some stuff, and Leo was sure that she was going to hate him, and she refused. She may not have forgiven him yet for losing her son to him, but she fully believes that her son would have liked Leo and would have wanted her to forgive him. So she said she'll give it a try. From there, we skipped over to Moira and caught up with her and the other two teenagers. Yeah. Exactly. Moira and the other two teens got some combat training from the adults, which is good because everyone's life is in danger at this point, so it's important that people know how to defend themselves. They even have been learning how to use some magic, and the adults demonstrated that in a very fun Naira versus Tigra fight, which was very much Morpheus versus Neo moment. The big tiger lost despite his size advantage, because Naira is just kind of... I don't want to say she's the John Wick of this series, but she's up there. After that, we went back to Leo and Melissa, because Leo finally opened up about the trauma between the two of them and why she found him in a nightclub, passed out in his own vomit with a prostitute in his uniform. A normal Tuesday night kind of thing. Turns out it's because he wanted a safe place to try drugs that wasn't going to get him fired. Not just any drugs, specifically the thing that he believed to be drugs that was given him by Naira's kid, Rin, before he was shot. Turns out it wasn't a drug at all. It was Prism. Ergo, the gas that you need to breathe to connect to magic. So, once Leo learned that it wasn't in fact drugs, and the whole thing had been a terrible misunderstanding that had gotten a kid killed, he was understandably messed up for a long while. So, he spiraled, and a lot of other people around him suffered because of it, but he's making restitution now, and he is fighting to be better. Which is good. But, will people forgive him? We'll find out. You guys ready? All right. As I snort water into my sinuses. Woo! I am a professional, guys. It's a good thing I edit things afterwards. Okay. Now that I can breathe again. Whew. Chapter 40. Promises, Promises. Present day. The room went quiet. Naira stood out in the hallway, captivated by what she'd overheard, but not wanting to intrude on something so personal. Melissa was the one to pick up the conversation. And you lived with that knowledge for 3 years? Leo chuckled. There's a reason I've been a total disaster. But that still doesn't explain how I found you. You were both on the floor, passed out. It looked real bad. Leo chuckled again. Yeah, things got a little worse. I had to sit down, and once I'd taken a seat against the bed, I told her everything. I had enough clarity in the moment it would have eaten me alive to hold it in. So I shared it all. After that, I think she smelled Necrol on me. Maybe not. Maybe she just wanted one herself. But she offered me a Necrol stick after I'd finished, and lit one herself. I think my story horrified her. Wasn't the, night of pleasure she was expecting. But I guess she felt sorry for me or something. Held my hand for a bit while we smoked, and then she kissed me. She what? But you said... I know, Leo cut her off. And it's true. Let me finish. She kissed me, and I panicked. With the fractal I'd taken, I was so distracted by all the tastes I was experiencing that it took me a moment to register what was happening. Everything from Necrol to strawberry lipstick to the mouthwash he'd probably used beforehand to... There was a heavy thumping sound, followed by indignant, Ow! I don't want to know what your one-night stand tasted like, Leo. She made a shuddering noise, accompanied with a bleh. Sorry, Leo said. Point is, it was weird. And I wasn't expecting it. She was gentle, but... Leo! Look, this is awkward. There's a reason I never told you. Well, stop telling me the weird details, and stick to the stuff I need to know. Leo sighed. I panicked. I figured that if she kissed me, that things might escalate, especially with both of us on Fractal. So I tried to push her away, stop the kiss, and I don't really know what happened, but she started choking and ended the kiss. Next thing I knew, she was throwing up. Then something stung in my lungs, and then I was throwing up. I passed out after that. When I came to, my clarity was fading. Panic set in, and I got her out of my uniform and fled. And then I ran into you outside. So I don't understand all of it, but that's the whole truth about what happened that night. Naira tapped a thumb against her leg. The polite thing to do would be to walk away and pretend she hadn't been listening to the entire story. But the teacher in her wanted to help address his confusion. Throwing social convention to the wind, she spoke up. You probably activated... Oh, first mistake of the night. You probably accidentally activated the Necrom. The other room fell silent. With a sigh, Naira stepped into the doorway, feeling the smile of embarrassment tugging at her lips. Sorry, I don't mean to intrude in your personal business, but I overheard the last bit. The last bit was well over 10 minutes worth of story, but they didn't need to know that. It was already awkward to admit she'd eavesdropped at all. If what you took that night came from Ren, it was likely Prism, which is why it didn't have any of the additives or side effects of the stuff you tried in college. But if you had Prism in your system, and you'd both filled the room with necro smoke, then you probably activated it. Since you didn't want her to kiss you, it sounds like you unintentionally directed it at her. There's a reason I keep telling you that Necrom is bad for you. With as much as you two probably had in your lungs at the time, you're lucky it didn't kill you both. Melissa still looked unhappy to have someone else as part of this conversation, and Leo looked as embarrassed as when he'd asked Naira to share a drink with him. He gave a quiet nod anyway. I didn't realize it was something you could activate, he said. With a nod of her own, Naira shrugged. It's one of the 7 fundamental reactions, but I haven't included it in any of our little evening lessons. It's not something for novices to play with. Leo stopped to consider. Fire, water, air, and so on. Those all make sense. But what does Necrom actually do, then? I told you before that it comes from blood. Specifically dead blood. Naira grimaced. Necrom opposes life. It is death and decay. When you excite a Necrom reaction, it'll eat through a person's insides like acid. Necrom damage is extensive enough that you often can't reverse its effects with a Kyurem treatment. Raising a finger, like a student only halfway committing to asking a question, Leo made several noises that weren't actually words. After a few moments, the words finally came. You know, hearing that Necrom liquefies your insides is a much more effective anti-Necrom argument than just, hey, you shouldn't do that because it's bad for you. Naira sighed. Necrom reactions are rather low energy by themselves. Yes, it will cause damage over time, but in small amounts that take years to show. It's when you activate it with Prism and direct the Necrom at something specific that it goes from a substance that can kill you in 30 years to something that will kill you in anywhere from 30 minutes to 30 seconds. Leo let out a clipped, ah, gulping nervously as his ears and tail drooped. So, if I don't want goopy insides, don't smoke Necrol while on Prism. Ideally, you buck the habit altogether, but I understand that takes time. How did you quit? He asked. Naira stiffened, a motion Leo probably misinterpreted since he immediately apologized. Sorry, Ame told me you used to smoke. Swallowing grew a little harder, but that was ridiculous. Naira could talk about this. It wasn't a proud memory, but it wasn't worth locking away yet. Not while there was still hope for saving Elaine. I had an experience similar to your own. As you've experienced now, Prism enhances the senses. So when your body starts to numb to normal methods, you experiment to achieve the effects you used to get. As a result, I used a Necrom and Prism together, and in attempting to share with my husband, I nearly killed him. He'd had a particularly stressful day. I just wanted to help him calm his nerves. Instead, I made everything worse. Leo looked shell-shocked. Good. Maybe this would be the one that finally got through to him. Even so, Naira's expression softened as she said, My advice? I know no better sobering agent than the bitter taste of realizing that you've inflicted pain and suffering on someone you love. But if you can, quit before you ever reach that point. Melissa shot him a look, but Leo's gaze had drifted to the floor. To his credit, he gave a quick nod of understanding. Sorry for my intrusion. I'll let you two get back to your conversation. As Naira turned to leave, Melissa mouthed a quick thank you. Seemed premature, but Naira returned a small nod anyway. If her experience could save anyone from similar pains, then it was worth sharing. The next few minutes were spent wandering. It was early evening, and group trainings were done for the day. Ame was in the kitchen with several of Renetta's staff, working to prep dinner that Renetta had paid for. A couple of Dolahan guards were hanging out in the garage, checking the weapons and gear their boss had slowly been stockpiling. Checking Ame's lab, Naira was surprised not to find Moira. The girl was almost always in there, making crystals for personal practice. A quick glance in the industrial refrigerator showed that Moira had been through here recently, as there were multiple racks in the process of crystallization. So, where was she? It wasn't until she stepped out on the back porch that Naira found her young friend. Moira was out in the yard, walking along the glass edge of the bulb with Naomi and Rolf. The three of them were engaged in boisterous conversation, their laughter easily carrying to Naira, even if their words weren't quite strong enough to pick out. Naira would have joined them, but a figure leaning on the porch railing beckoned her over. Renetta Dolahan stood there, cast in long shadows by the rapidly fading sun. Security Chief Marston was there too, of course. For being a Sneppard, he made an excellent lapdog. He proved this by snarling as... He proved this by snarling at Naira as she drew closer. Not audibly. He was more tactful than that, especially in the presence of his master. But his expression towards Naira was still overflowing with distrust. He flinched, his attention drawn to Renetta as she tapped his arm. Marston, why don't you take a break? Grab a bite to eat, or relax with a drink or something. Naira can watch me for a little while. His scowl traveled from one end of his face to the other and back. Clearly, this new instruction held little appeal to him. However, disobedience wasn't in his character, and he gave a grudging, "Yes, ma'am," and left. Naira had little doubt she'd spot him at the window in a few minutes, a victim of his own paranoia. "I've been informed by several members of my staff that this is uncommon behavior for my dear Moira. Sergei said that she's not made any lasting friendships at school, and that the times I thought she was sneaking out to be with friends, she was instead getting into trouble by herself. She's been rebellious and strong-willed for years, but my staff seems to agree. This is the first time in a long time that they've seen her relax enough to be a kit." Naira slid into a smile, leaning into the banister beside Renetta. "I'll admit, I'm amazed to see them get along so well, but it seems that they've actually become good friends." "Friends in the most unexpected of places," Renetta agreed. "Warms a mother's heart to see her child find happiness, especially where others have given up on it." Naira watched Sneppard and Nulf engage with childlike innocence, despite all of them being close to full adulthood. It wasn't hard to picture Ren out there, laughing and joking with them, and her heart ached. Would he have come to see Moira as a sister, the way Naira was starting to see her as a daughter? "Have you given up on it?" Naira asked. "What? Happiness?" "Peace between us." Renetta's teeth glinted in the waning orange glow, and she readjusted on her elbows. "With everything that's happened between us, I'd assumed we were nearly square, love." "Not talking about you and I specifically. Peace between our species." A soft, scraping sound pricked Naira's ears as Renetta dragged a finger claw along the wooden banister. "Not fully. Admittedly, it took a few hits during your little stint of keeping me as your basement tenant. But considering I returned the favor and then some, I suppose I'm not much better." Renetta sighed, and Naira could almost pick up the slight rasp in her voice, the little hitch in every breath that continued to feed Moira's insecurities. "No, love, believe it or not, that's a hope I've had ever since I was a little girl. My family was slightly richer than most, though still poor by the standards of the truly wealthy. Undaunted, my mother was a queen in her own mind, and absolutely had to be waited on hand and foot. When we couldn't afford to hire high-end Sneppard servants, my father convinced her to try taking on Nulfs. We could get them at 10-to-1 kind of rates, so my mother splurged. Soon, the balance in the house shifted, until orange and black became far more commonplace than white and grey." Out in the yard, the kits laughed as Naomi helped Moira scramble onto Rolf's shoulders for a better view. She tipped him backwards, and her panicked tugging on his forehead nearly took him with her. Quick reflexes and a steady hand from Naomi kept them both from falling. "We were a big family," Renetta continued. "I was second to youngest of 7 children, pampered only until baby Winona came along. The older kits had Sneppard tutors, but the younger ones of us had Nulfin ones. I still remember mine. Mr. Lanitra. He had drooping jowls and had to squint to see anything, but he spent minutes combing his hair and facial fur every morning. His reading skills weren't the best, probably related to his bad eyesight, but his comprehension of math was spot on. People thought I was a prodigy, since none of my siblings were good with numbers the way I was, but it's because he understood how to teach me in a way that would stick. If I could have hired him for Moira's education, I would have in a heartbeat. Fortunately, he died shortly after I got married. When the time came to consider Moira's education, Charles and I thought it important that she develop social skills." Looking uncharacteristically embarrassed, Renetta drew a deep breath as she continued. "I, was not able to have any more children. The fact we ever had Moira was nothing short of a miracle. Knowing that she wouldn't have any siblings, we assumed that putting her in a more public form of education would encourage her to make friends." The teenagers were climbing a tree now, knocking down great clumps of leaves as they scrambled from branch to branch. "From what I've seen," Naira said, "she's pretty good at making friends." Renetta's face warmed in a smile. "It's always been part of who she is. She likes people. Whenever I would take her to a store, she was always more interested in the customers and employees than whatever toys or clothes I tried to bribe her with. When she was much younger, she had several friends in school who would visit on a regular basis, but that faded with time. After her father passed away, well, I think parts of both of us died along with him. Though in her case, perhaps those parts only went to sleep and are now being reawakened by new friends. And you? What about me, love? Leaning into her elbow, Renetta raised an eyebrow as she glanced up at Naira. Are you asleep or dead? Naira asked. Air huffed through Renetta's nose, precursor to a wry smile. Both. And neither. I've died several times over at this point. Emotionally, mentally, even physically. But I'm one of the lucky ones. Her gaze drifted back out towards her daughter. I've got someone dragging me back to the warmth of the fire. Naira watched a branch snap free under Rolf's weight. He slipped, his fingers scrabbling for purchase on the limb overhead. Before Naomi could react, Moira was there, gripping his arm to help him recover his balance. If she had any fear of his weight dragging them both out of the tree, she didn't let it show. How many times had that hand been there for Naira? In the Dolahan's basement, in their kitchen, in the prison? Who would Naira be if she'd never met this naive but caring girl who loved magic and people, regardless of shape or color? Maybe that's something we have in common, Naira murmured. They fell silent for a while, enjoying the crisp cool of the night air, as the sound of the teens achieving a new perch mingled with the distant call of cicadas. It wasn't a bad moment, until Naira caught a glimpse of Marston peeking out at them through a curtain. Go figure. Oblivious to this, Renetta spoke up. I know you and I have no reason to be close after what we've done to each other, but you did help my daughter save my life. Beyond that, you've kept us safe from those monsters you found. In light of these things, I've chosen to trust you. I know that's likely small consolation, but you've earned it. Caught off guard, Naira struggled to find a meaningful response. When none came, she simply gave a small nod and a quick, thank you. If I'm being honest with myself, love, there's no outcome I can see to our situation where I survive. If the 13 are consolidating, as all evidence seems to indicate, then my presence as a moderate is a threat, especially considering my stance on Nulfs. The dagger's been plunged into my chest already. I've little doubt it'll happen again, and Moira won't always be there to save me. Naira snorted. That's a bit of a bleak outlook, don't you think? Renetta's lips curled in a small smile. Too much of a realist to think any differently. Meeting Naira's eyes, she hesitated. Should the worst happen, will you keep Moira safe for me? I've already made arrangements for a permanent pension for you, should you agree. It's only fair to pay you for your time and effort. Blinking in surprise, Naira's response slipped out. I'm not sure your staff will let me. Renetta smirked. Then it's a good thing in that it's my decision to make, not theirs. There have been a few who have voiced their concerns, but I promise they are in fact the minority, and you should not let them influence your decision. Naira's mind continued to pump out excuses. I am a pretty terrible bodyguard. If I'd stayed at your house like you expected of me, you probably would never have been stabbed. Nodding, Renetta said. True, but you were helping my daughter rescue a friend. You protected her in the bowels of Fanina. Naira grimaced. Naomi's the one who saved her. With a sigh, Renetta said, If you don't want to do it, love, just say that. I can't force you to do this, but I don't have many options to turn to. Not ones I trust, anyway. Why was Naira making excuses? She wasn't one to waste time, nor did she often stop to consider her failures, as that would handicap her future successes. Besides, the girl was precious to her. She shouldn't need to be bribed into looking out for her. So why was she so hesitant? Because she had lost Ren. Because she stood to lose Elaine. Because Dazale had lost himself. Because despite all her attempts to keep the bright, eager, friendly Sneppered girl at arm's length, Moira had set up space in her heart anyway. and losing her was becoming painful to consider. That really left Naira with only one response. The same response she'd had when she opened that first letter almost a year ago. No matter what it takes. I give you my word. I will do everything in my power to keep your daughter safe. Satisfied, Renetta nodded and turned back towards her daughter. They decided to play tag in the tree, and Ame's yard was collecting the casualties. More laughter reached them, and the two adults shared a knowing smile. Though they might differ in other areas, on this one they agreed. Something like this was worth fighting for. Naira's thoughts drifted through memories of when her family had known simple happiness like that. And it prompted her to say, "You are not the only one expecting to not survive the days ahead. With the risks I take, it's a miracle I'm not dead already. Undoubtedly, there's going to come a time where I believe a stupid course of action to be the only right one, and is going to get me killed." Renetta laughed, turning to her with a raised eyebrow. Naira, love, you realize that if you die, then the rest of us are probably already dead? If I've learned anything about you, it's that when things get violent, you will be the last to fall. Grimacing, Naira gave a soft snort. I'm too stubborn to do anything other than go down swinging. Still, it would give me great peace of mind to know that if I die, my family is still taken care of. Tiny and broken as it is, I am doing all of this for them, and I don't want it to have been for nothing. After a few long moments of regarding her, Renetta nodded. Very well. Then she smiled. You know, I think I would greatly enjoy a concert after all this. I might have to reserve an entire theatre for one of your husband's performances. If you're still alive, I'll let you sit anywhere you like, provided it's right beside me. They shared in a low chuckle, but Naira's mirth was eaten away by the knowledge that Elaine's hand was hidden away in her quarters. She had left it in a Curum solution to slow decay and discourage the formation of any stench. The Elaine who taught her to appreciate music would never play his instruments again. Elaine the musician had been killed because of her. Now, the best she could hope for was to save Elaine the maimed hostage. Of course, there was a bigger problem. Salatra had been set loose, and had gone much further now than she ever had as a youth. Could Elaine still love her, in spite of what she'd become? Could he love a woman whose hands were saturated in blood? They'd loved each other for almost 3 decades. Was it fair to him to assume that 9 months could undo something with such a strong foundation? No, of course it wasn't. This experience would leave them both deformed for the rest of their lives, but it couldn't kill their bond. No matter the cost, Naira would make sure of that. The next morning, Leo found the courage to tell... Let's try that again. The next morning, Leo found the courage to tell Naira about Bradburn's requested meeting. Leading her towards the garage, he brought her up to speed as they walked. She didn't tell him that she'd already heard most of it, as that would have been rather tactless. There was a new piece of information, though, and he hesitated. Tolson called this morning. He said there was a message for me from the hospital. Do you mind if we go see my mother before meeting Bradburn? She's not doing well? Naira asked. Leo's face fell, and he shook his head. She's lost a lot of basic motor function, and I guess she's struggling to keep food down. Naira's heart panged. If any of Tazael's actions had put her in the hospital for real, would he have visited her? Leo's eyes went distant for a bit, then settled on her. It took a few moments for Naira to remember he was expecting an answer. Oh, yes, she said with an incline of her head. I do not mind at all. Looking relieved, Leo nodded. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, he held open the door to the garage for her. As he stepped inside, Naira was surprised to see someone had left the lights on. Beside her, Leo slowed his steps, ears twitching to something only he could hear, and his attention shot off towards where the hoverbikes were parked. No one was making themselves obvious down here, but a pair of scents were strong enough to be recent. Scents tied to 2 specific girls. She breathed their names into Leo's ear, and his hand relaxed from where it had reached into his jacket. Then they both walked in that direction. It wasn't hard to find them. Both methods of tracking led to a pair of figures hunched between the bikes. They stood up as Leo and Naira approached, Naomi using her foot to shove a bag to the side as she loudly called out, "And that's why the repulsor mounts to the frame." "Oh, right," Moira said in an equally suspect tone. "Because that way the electrum goes through the tube things to get to the repulsors so that the bike, you know..." She bounced her hands like she was juggling. "Does the whole staying upright thing," Naomi finished before turning to Naira with overly forced shock. "Oh, Mrs. N. Don't often see you in the garage. What brings you down here?" Folding her arms, Naira spotted the pair of helmets resting on the ground right before Moira stepped in front of them. "Chief Leo and I have a few errands to run, and we were going to take his car." "Oh, fun!" Moira chimed in, her finger tapping rapidly on her thigh. "Good to have an outing every once in a while. Keeps things from getting stale and samey." Walking around the hover bike, Leo headed for the bag both adults had apparently seen. "Unless people are looking for you," he noted, crouching beside the bag. "Then going outside becomes dangerous." Unzipping it, he dug around for a moment before producing Naomi's signature crowbar. "This part of the mechanics lesson?" Naomi's eyes went wide, and she blurted, "So that's where that darn thing went. I was looking everywhere, and it was in my bag the whole time." She bonked her forehead with her palm. "I'm so oblivious sometimes." Leo shook the bag, filling the small garage with a clinking sound. Digging around some more, he asked, "And the 24 crystals?" "This is quite a lot of aquam." "For practice," Moira chimed in. "Seriously," Naomi said, "don't let us keep you. You've got places to be, and we've got mechanicking and alchemancy practice to get back to. So I'll just take that." Her fingers slowly gripped the bag, and she tugged it towards herself with a guilty smile. It reminded Naira of many attempts from her boys to keep their activities clandestine, which also meant the only way to get them to admit anything was to confront them. "Who's going to tell me what's actually going on?" The girls looked at each other before reaching an unspoken agreement. With a sigh, Moira said, "We knew you guys were going to go get information today, so we thought we would too. Look for other stuff while you went to confront Bradburn." "Stuff like..." Leo prompted. Both girls stiffened and gave Naira guilty looks. Finally, Naomi said in a hushed tone, "We were gonna go look for Tazael." Ah, that explained why they both looked like she'd caught them with their hands in the cookie jar. "I assume you weren't going to tell me." "I mean," Naomi started, scratching at the back of her neck, "if we came back learning something important, then we'd share. To be honest, I intend to chew him out for bailing out and leaving us to deal with a bomb. Might have to kick his rump, too. Didn't want to put his mother through watching that." Moira spoke up then. "Don't worry. I'll keep things from going too far." She said this with unwavering confidence, her eyes bright and her jaw set firm. To Naira, the promise sounded like a toddler intending to separate brawling high school students. Yes, they'd been teaching both of them how to fight, but Moira had little physicality to back it up. And yet, her face bore her mother's signature dogged determination. With a sigh, Naira gave a small nod. "Very well, but I just got through promising your mother last night that I would keep you safe, so I'm trusting both of you to look out for each other." As one, both girls brightened, tripping over each other to give assurances that they would have each other's backs. "Where are you going first?" Naira asked. Rezipping the bag and shouldering it, Naomi pointedly ignored Chief Leo's cocked eyebrow and said, "Gonna hit up a few of the old hideouts, see if he's still using any of them. If not, I've got people I can ask. Might even swing by your place. What about you guys? Where you headed? Straight to Bradburn?" Naira shot a questioning glance at Leo, unsure how much he wanted to share. He shook his head, but not at her. "I need to stop in and see my mother first." "Oh, how sweet," Moira said. "She gonna bake you cookies and remind you to smile at least once a day?" "No, she's dying." The mood of the room was instantly smothered. Naomi's eyes went wide, and Moira's jaw dropped as her hand came up to cover her mouth. Through her fingers, she said, "I am so sorry. I had no idea. I just..." Lifting his hand, Leo cut her off. With a hint of a smirk, he shook his head. "You're all good, Kit. You had no way of knowing." As expected, Naira caught glimpses of Moira's fur bristling at being referred to as Kit, but she handled herself well and kept back any retort, not wanting to make the moment worse. Instead, she asked, "Is there anything I can do to help?" Leo shrugged. "Her nerves have been deteriorating for the last decade. Some genetic thing, I guess. There have been a lot of doctors over the years who've tried things to help, but no one has been able to." "Can I try?" For as nonchalant as his posture had become, Leo suddenly stiffened, and he forced a slow exhale through his nose. "Will it make you feel better if you do?" Moira nodded. Turning to Naira, Leo asked, "Is it doable?" "Can we sneak in the materials?" she asked. "Sure." "Can we give her a Curum treatment?" "Probably." "Will it help?" "I can't say." Naira hesitated, looking for the most gentle way to warn Moira. "Curum can't fix everything wrong with the body." "I know," Moira said, her hand shooting up to grip her own arm through an overly poofy sleeve. And no doubt she did. The healing she'd accomplished on her mother was miraculous, but even it couldn't restore her to perfect health. For a patient who'd been slowly wasting away over a decade, Naira wasn't going to hold on to any false hopes, but neither was she going to dampen Moira's tender-hearted spirit. Moira's fingers tensed, and her evident shame was quickly driven away by the return of her determination. Let's try that one again. Moira's fingers tensed, and her evident shame was quickly driven away by the return of her determination. "I'd still like to try." Giving a nod and a shrug, Leo said, "All right then. I'll meet you guys at the hospital." Water break. Chapter 41. Nothing Ventured. It was the smell that unsettled Moira. There was such a thing as smelling too clean. Your nose knew when it should be smelling something and couldn't, and that was an unpleasant experience. This was her second time in a public hospital. Last time she'd come to steal things. This time she was complicit in sneaking things in. One day she'd go to a hospital without any reason to feel guilty every time she passed a security guard. There was no prism in her system, not yet, though she was painfully aware of the look she was drawing for wearing sunglasses indoors. Was it really any different from the look she drew for her colorful outfits anyway? The more she thought about it, the more she decided it was no different. Fine. This was a fashion choice, and Cyphus could just stuff their prudish addiction to formal attire up its underbelly. Leo poked his head out the door with a quiet, "She's ready." Naira's hand came down to guide Moira into the room, and she swatted it away gently with a snort. "They're dark, but I'm not blind." Taking the hint, Naira entered the room. Moira followed behind, and Naomi brought up the rear. A simple audio monitor sounded off a steady heartbeat, an odd, robotic contrast to the tremulous breathing coming from the bed. Moira was not ready for what she saw. Leo had said that his mother was about 10 years older than Moira's own, but the gaunt skeleton of a woman in the bed looked like she was nearer to 100. She looked ready to be laid in a coffin. "Mom, these are the friends I was telling you about." One by one, Leo introduced them all, each of them earning a taut but genuine smile in turn. Those sunken eyes, a dull violet color to match her son's vibrant gaze, turned to fall on Moira. Words came in slow spurts and dragging breaths.
Someone says you've come to help me.
Moira swallowed hard, a fresh wave of self-doubt threatening to drown her in uselessness. She wouldn't let it. I've come to try. I'll, guard the door, Naomi said, excusing herself to stand just outside the room. Methodically, Naira reached into her alchemy satchel, pulling out several canisters of prism and several high-grade Curum crystals. She laid them out in order on the table by the bed as Leo brought over a chair for Moira. Shaking her head, she gave him a half smile. I appreciate it, but I think I'd rather stand for this. With a shrug, he took the seat himself. His chin came down to rest calmly on folded hands, but the accelerated bouncing of his knee told the real story. Moira was nervous too, but she took a dose of prism anyway. The room came to life, and even the drab, sterile grays of the walls, ceiling, and floor seemed a bit brighter in the warm sunlight streaming through the window. As always, Naira's breathing was calm, despite the punchy, driving beat of her song. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Leo's song was calm as his breathing and heartbeat slowly increased. Mrs. Parsons' song brought a tear to Moira's eyes. It was beautiful. The damage to her body had cast the notes in a haunting melancholy, but there was a defiant vibrancy to the melody that refused to be dampened. It was a song that carried warmth and strength and compassion all in one. If you rocked a child to sleep with that song, surely it would rest without terrors for the rest of its life. So much of the song had faded to time. Pieces weren't missing, but they softened to such volumes that they went unheard unless Moira strained to catch them. Still, she cracked the Curum crystal and did her best. Matching the melody bolstered Moira in a way she'd never experienced before. Every muted note... Bolstered. That's the word. Let's do that again. Still, she cracked the Curum crystal and did her best. Matching the melody bolstered Moira in a way she'd never experienced before. Every muted note that she filled in for provided her with a fresh warmth that drove her to sing with greater intensity. Her hand rested on Mrs. Parsons' stomach, Curum crystal pressed into folds of a scratchy hospital gown. Mrs. Parsons' hand came up to rest atop her own, the fingers bony and cold, as if she was truly reduced to just a skeleton. As she listened, Mrs. Parsons' smile stretched her cheeks into cliff edges, and her wrinkled eyelids drifted closed. The magic flowed into her body. Moira could feel it moving and searching. It reinforced what it found, bringing strength as it went. It wasn't enough. The more Moira filled in the fading notes, the more the magic just glossed over the damaged parts. Whatever connecting pathways had existed there before were long closed. The Curum could leap the chasms and spread warmth and strength into her limbs, but it couldn't repair the bridges. Why? She could feel what was wrong. She heard it plain as day. She'd conveyed it to the magic, and the magic had found it and surrounded it. That had always been enough before. Why didn't it work now? She took more prism. She cracked a fresh crystal. The longer she sang the song, the more she never wanted to stop. It was one of the loveliest things she'd ever heard, but her mind wouldn't let her forget reality. This woman was dying, her beautiful song crumbling into ash, and Moira couldn't stop it. It was too much. The tragedy of it all overwhelmed her. She was doing everything right, and it didn't matter. Her ability to sing faltered as her frustration grew. By the time the second crystal faded, her voice was shaking. She didn't reach for a third. It wouldn't help.
That was beautiful,
Mrs. Parsons croaked from the bed. Even as her voice cracked, it wasn't enough to suppress that melody that now drove needles of guilt through Moira's eardrums. Leo's chair creaked as he leaned in, his knee thumping as fast as ever. How do you feel?
Better,
Mrs. Parsons said. Her song didn't change the way it should when a person lied. There was no shift to minor tones. So it wasn't a lie, but Moira knew it wasn't much of a truth either.
I feel more whole than I have in years.
What difference did that make if she was still stuck in bed? A new, horrifying reality set in for Moira. She'd been so confident that she could help. Instead, all she'd done was torture this poor woman by dangling something in front of her that she could no longer have. "I'm sorry," Moira choked out. "There's nothing I can do. I'm not... It won't last." Leo shot her a look, the hope in his eyes dying as he realized what she was saying. Seed Mother. Her selfish overconfidence had tortured and killed 2 people today. A cold pressure took her fingers as Mrs. Parsons squeezed her hand. Moira's attention was drawn back to that sallow, too-thin face, which wore a smile she didn't deserve.
"It means the world to me that you tried, my dear. You have a lovely singing voice, and I think you must be the prettiest visitor I've ever had."
More guilt pounded at the door to Moira's mind. Stubbornly, she shook her head. "I just sing what I hear. It's only lovely because I was copying your song." Mrs. Parsons coughed quietly, covering her mouth with a stiff, emaciated hand. The action took visible effort, but the smile returned the moment the coughing stopped.
"I'm afraid I've never been much of a singer. Never could carry a tune."
Leo reached over to rest a hand over his mother's. "I must have gotten that from you." He smiled, and his eyes were present and bright, but they weren't happy. How had such a sourpuss ever come from a woman as full of gentle beauty and warmth as this? Let's try that again. How had such a sourpuss ever come from a woman as full of gentle beauty and warmth as this?
"Maybe you should have your friend here give you singing lessons,"
his mother said. Too much. It was all too much. Moira could feel the tears building, no matter how much she tried to clamp down on them. She hadn't helped. She couldn't. Gently, she extricated her hand from Mrs. Parsons' grip. Giving it a soft pat before withdrawing it entirely. "I'm sorry I failed you." It was all she could say. Naira stiffened beside her, clearly intending to say something, but it was Mrs. Parsons who spoke.
"You haven't failed, dear. You helped me remember what it means to feel alive. And I must be the cruelest person in all of Cyphus.
Moira's hands balled into fists at her side. "I'm so sorry." The adults continued to speak, to offer useless platitudes that ignored the truth. Knowing she was about to break, Moira fled. Naomi jumped as she burst out the door, but Moira picked a direction and kept moving. She didn't care where. The smell, that overpowering stench of artificial clean, like the contents of the Curum crystals that had let her down. It was everywhere, taunting her in her failure. "Pips?" Naomi called after her. Claws clicked on the tile floor as her Nolfin friend jogged after her. "Wait up, Moira!" Moira didn't slow down, but what hope did she have of outrunning an Amazonian goddess with legs like trees? "What happened in there?" Moira shook her head, nose wrinkling and whiskers twitching. "Nothing." "But I heard you singing and..." Turning her head, Moira looked up to find concerned, coddling eyes, and she couldn't stop herself from snapping, "Nothing happened! That's the problem!" They reached a sitting area, and Moira headed for an armchair in the corner. No sooner had she plopped down than she drew her knees up to her chest and stopped fighting the tears. Beside her, Naomi glanced at the tasteless sign posted above the seats, insisting that dogs stay off the furniture. Hesitating for only a moment, she ignored it and took the seat beside Moira. They sat there for several minutes. Naomi tried asking a few more questions, but Moira answered them curtly enough that she backed off. That wasn't fair. It wasn't Naomi that Moira was mad at. It was herself. Her stupid, overconfident, underskilled, imperfect self. If you failed at something, you hadn't tried hard enough. That was the unspoken Dolahan creed. Her mother was living proof that those who worked hard and pushed themselves got what they wanted. but not Moira. Someone wandered into the sitting area, taking the seat across from her. Mr. Incompetent himself, the dependent police chief Leo, had followed her. Seed Mother, she was being unfair again. She was just so frustrated. If it helps, I knew it wasn't going to work, he said in a hushed, coddling tone. He'd known she would fail and still let her do it? How the brack was that supposed to be helpful? Then why didn't you stop me and spare us all this needless pain and suffering? Because you helped her. I don't believe her for a second. I know what I heard, and I know that I didn't fix anything. The corner of Leo's mouth pulled back in a smile, one that still fell short of his eyes. You don't know her like I do. You did something for her today that no one else could have. You brought life and hope into a place of soul-sucking death. A snappered nurse walked past behind him, and she paused, fixing the back of his head with a frown. The frown deepened as the nurse looked at Naomi before finding the courage to speak up. The Nulfin waiting room is out by the elevators. Our visitors are already under duress. They don't need additional sources of stress. Beside her, Naomi growled. First of all, nobody asked you a bracking thing. Second of all, my friend here is under duress because of your inability to heal people. So why don't you go back to torturing people with needles or whatever unhelpful task you do around here, and stop telling me how to help my friend? The nurse stiffened. Do I need to call security? Leo's fingers curled, his claws disappearing into the pads of his palms. The exasperation on his face made Moira afraid he was about to shoot someone. If he made Naomi get up, Moira was going to... Glancing back over his shoulder, Leo looked up at the nurse. The only one causing problems here is you. You're not someone I recognize, so you're probably new to the neurology ward. But you can ask any of the senior staff here about Officer Leo Parsons, and they'll give you a half-dozen stories about what happened the last few times a nurse tried to be helpful when I didn't ask for it. So with all due respect, you and your concerns can both go straight to Fanina. He flashed her a smile, and she flinched. Her tail flicked timidly at the tip, and her gaze drifted to his chest. Whether she saw the gun or the badge, Moira wasn't sure. But whatever she saw convinced her that adherence to written hospital policy wasn't worth it in this case, and she left. Watching her go, Leo shook his head. Seed Mother, I hate hospitals. Bunch of ravenous, soul-sucking vampires who care more about appearance and Christendom than actually helping people. Thanks for that, Naomi said, her hair bouncing against her snout as she gestured with it towards the departed nurse. He nodded. Don't mention it. In fact... Leo trailed off as he got to his feet. Walking over, he gripped the "No Nulfs in the Waiting Area" sign along its top edge and ripped it from the wall. Bits of paint and plaster stuck to the tape that had been used to hold it in place. Turning it over in his hand, his scowl deepened, and he held it out towards Naomi. Don't suppose you want this? With a snort, she shook her head. I'm good without it. Yeah, I figured, he said, walking to a nearby trash can and dumping the sign inside. Okay. Maybe he wasn't that bad of a guy. In the heat of Moira's self-frustrations, it was just easier to assume the worst about everyone else. Returning to his chair, he leaned against the back, but didn't move to sit down again. Seriously, Moira, my mother wouldn't want you to beat yourself up. Doctors with 10 times your experience have been trying to save her for years. Excuse me. For the record, I firmly believe that you're easily 5 times more effective than any of them. But what my mom has, it isn't fixable. We've both known that for a long time. But, you know, there's other parts to a person that can be mended outside of just the body. She doesn't get guests. We've got family, but they don't know. It would be worse on her if they knew. So she gets a weekly visit from me. You didn't see the way her face lit up when I said I'd brought guests. Just spending time with her helped her. Helped us, both more than I can repay. So, what I'm trying to say is thank you. The words stung, though not like Moira expected. As much as she felt like she should be crying, the tears were drying on their own. It sucked to have failed, especially when it seemed like there was no reason for the failure other than her own skills being deficient. However, it would be rude to just write off his words. Besides, they weren't quite as coddling as they could have been. Numb as the action was, she forced a nod. Sorry. Letting out a snort, Leo looked at Naomi. Maybe you should start smacking her every time she makes an unnecessary apology. Moira glanced up at her friend to find her wearing a mischievous grin. Might have to make it every other time, or she'll bruise up and her mom will kill me. Great. They were ganging up on her now. Moira rolled her eyes. Careful, she warned. I smack back now. I do still have a bruise on my hip from our last spar, Naomi admitted. Really? Moira asked, her mood instantly improving at the idea that she'd actually managed to do something correctly. Naomi shrugged. It's a tiny one, but yeah. Moira's face slumped into a scowl, but her mood had actually improved. At least a little. You guys are free to go do your thing. I'll probably only spend a few more minutes with Mom, and then I'm taking Naira to the meeting. Leo was fully standing now, and he gestured between them. You guys need anything before you go? Moira shook her head, and Naomi spoke up. I think we're good. Leo nodded. And I'll see you back at the house. Carefully, Naira gathered up the crystal fragments that Moira had left behind. Mrs. Parsons continued to stare at the door as Naira worked, the only sound in the room the beep of the heart rate monitor. It had slowed a bit to match Moira's tempo, but the girl probably hadn't noticed. Even now, her singing was stuck on repeat in Naira's head. Based on the low humming she heard from Mrs. Parsons, she wasn't the only one.
You have a lovely daughter.
Naira blinked in surprise. Allowing herself a chuckle, she replied, I don't have a daughter. The seed mother gave me all boys.
How many?
Having no desire to throw Leo under the bus with his own mother, Naira said, 2. Slowly, Mrs. Parsons nodded.
Boys are a blessing too.
Naira saw their faces, smiling as they helped in the kitchen, grumping as they weeded in the yard, yawning as they did homework, and sparkling as they celebrated birthdays. Yeah, she said quietly. They are.
You're friends with my son?
The hesitancy in the question was physical rather than emotional. As near to death as this woman was, she had no use for fear, and lived accordingly. I'm his consultant on alchemancy.
Is that what that dear Miss Moira did to me?
Naira nodded as she deposited her handful of crystal... Naira nodded as she deposited her handful of... Third time. Naira nodded as she deposited her handful of Curum fragments in a small trash can by the bed. She gave you a Curum treatment. A laugh issued from Mrs. Parsons, one that went silent halfway through when breath became absent.
I've had Curum treatments before, from doctors, but never have they sung for me.
It was impossible to suppress the smile that stretched across Naira's muzzle. Yeah, Moira's special.
You don't know how relieved I am that my son has friends.
Friend was a strong term, especially considering who Leo was. However, she'd been honest with him. She didn't hate him. How could she? Ren wouldn't want that. You say that like he doesn't have friends, Naira noted. Mrs. Parsons sighed, bony fingers lacing together at her waist.
He did a good job driving them away after I was hospitalized. As far as I know, Tolson was too stubborn to abandon him. And from what I've been told, Leo and Melissa are patching things up between them. Do you work with them too?
I've met them both before, yes. Gripping the chair Leo had left behind, Naira pulled it over beside the bed. It'd probably be a few minutes before he came back. He deserved some credit, though. The moment his mother had asked him to check on Moira, he'd hopped right to it.
They're a good pair, aren't they?
Tilting her head, Naira voiced her confusion. Who?
Leo and Melissa.
Ah, so Mrs. Parsons was that kind of mother. Offering a small smile, Naira said, I'll confess, my boys didn't reach that stage while they were in the house, so I'm not the best judge of that sort of thing.
He trusts you, you know.
Naira blinked at the non sequitur. Pardon?
Leo doesn't bring people to see me unless he trusts them. He's also too much of a realist to get swept away by sales pitches or appeals to emotion, which tells me that girl is the real deal.
Naira's smile widened. That she is. She saved several lives already. Leaning into one side, Mrs. Parsons reached for a glass of water beside the bed. Naira picked it up for her, handing it to her. Accepting it with a quick note of thanks, Mrs. Parsons drank before saying,
I wasn't lying. I'm in much less pain than I was when I woke up this morning. I don't get to move much unless other people move me, so I'm perpetually sore. Some of that abated as I listened to her song.
Naira's smile settled into something more melancholy, and she nodded. I'm glad to hear it. A moment of silence stretched between them. Mrs. Parsons studied patterns on the wall, patterns she'd most likely memorized over the past decade. Finally, her gaze shifted to Naira.
May I ask you for something, mother to mother?
You may ask, Naira said with a chuckle, though I only promise what it is within my power to grant.
Make sure someone watches out for Leo. I haven't been able to for a long time, and while he is remarkably self-reliant, he also seems to just attract bad luck. He's also easily discouraged, even if he's too stubborn to give up on his course.
She smirked.
Gets that from his mother. He could use little pushes of encouragement from time to time to keep him on the right path. It doesn't have to be you if you're not the right person for it, but I don't exactly have anyone else to ask, and I wanted to ask somebody before the end.
Leaning back in her chair, Naira's hands folded in her lap. Her lips curled at the corners, and she shook her head with a smile. You know, you're the second person to ask me something like that. Just last night, Moira's own mother asked me to keep an eye on her.
And that says something about your character and your capabilities.
Something like that. Mrs. Parsons' hand came to rest on the short railing lining the edge of her bed. The bones were so thin and frail, Naira worried the hand would snap in half if the woman put any weight on it.
Will you do it, then?
Mrs. Parsons asked. Dull as her eyes were, they gained a hint of vibrancy to accentuate the urgency of her plea. What a strange coincidence. Inclining her ear in a slow, practiced bow, Naira responded, I will do what I can. Bringing her hand to rest upon Mrs. Parsons, she enveloped the cold, shaking hand in the warmth and strength of her own. It seemed to do the woman good as she relaxed in visible relief.
He's a good boy.
Naira's smile stiffened, but only momentarily. One day the knee-jerk responses would be entirely gone. She nodded. Yes, he's rare in that regard. He values doing what's right. You should be very proud. The hand rotated beneath hers, and the fingers squeezed with little more strength than a toddler. Mrs. Parsons' lips wobbled, and she brought her free hand up to dab at a sunken eye.
I am more proud than he will ever know. Everyone says their child's going to be the one to change the world. But I know that's my Leo.
Naira could smell him again. In all likelihood, he was standing at the door. So she added, I think you might be right. It was impossible not to think about what might have been. How much might have been accomplished in a world where Leo and Rendal's fatal encounter had ended not in tragedy, but in the joining of hands. How much could Cyphus have changed in that time? How much was it about to change anyway? Most importantly, was there a future in Cyphus for her and her family? History screamed at her that it could never be. The door opened rather noisily as Leo re-entered the room. Looks like you two are getting along well. His smile was plastered on. Not disingenuous, but certainly forced. Striding into the room, he took up a spot standing beside the bed, leaning against the railing.
Good mothers always get along, Leo,
His mother said. Naira? A good mother? She didn't deserve that. As if sensing the unspoken doubt, Naira felt Mrs. Parsons squeeze her hand. A glance up at the woman revealed a small but knowing smile, which Naira returned. Okay. She could do that. She'd been a good mother before, and she'd do it again, even if that meant her family now extended to not just one, but two Sneppards. Who was next? One of the other detectives? One of Tazael and Rendal's friends? Above all else, Elaine remained at the top of the priority list. If she couldn't save the man who had taught her how to be happy, then how could she possibly hope to look out for anyone else? The meeting with Bradburn was a chance to find him. And if that wretched, scheming man did have her husband, there'd be Fanina to pay. Normal people feared Anima and her wrath. They hadn't met an angry Salatra. If Bradburn had her husband, he was in for an early storm day. End of part 5. Part 6. Fyrom. Water break again. The chapters in Volume 2 are definitely a little bit shorter than Volume 1. We're pretty consistently fitting 3 chapters into a night, which is cool. We're getting, I was going to say more story. It's the same amount of pages. It's just, we switch POVs more often. I need to get a thing ready. And we'll put that there. Where is... Oh, it's way down there. Whoops. It has to be above that guy. Okay. Professional streamer here. All right. Shall we fit in one more chapter? I think yes. And this one kicks off part 6. And if you haven't noticed up to this point, I developed a habit while writing this book. And I thought it started out as a coincidence, but I thought it was cool afterwards, so I kept it. But every part, like every new part in the book, opens with a flashback chapter. And this one's no exception. This one's just going to suck. But that's okay. I mean, what? Chapter 42. Lightning Awakened. 9 months ago. Naira awoke to a hand on her shoulder. Starlight, dear, the bus leaves in 20 minutes. Letting out a groan, Naira rolled onto her back, blinking against warm sunlight that peered through the shades. Drowsiness left her as she ran her fingers through her hair, pulling it away from her eyes. Elaine stood over her, already dressed for the day and wearing a smile that could melt anyone's heart. Shifting up onto her elbows, Naira let out a yawn. Why didn't you wake me earlier? Because you push yourself too hard sometimes. Leaning in, he planted a kiss on her forehead. With how late you worked yesterday, I figured you could use the extra sleep. After a moment of rubbing the crusties from her eyes, she got up and prepared to make the bed. Elaine hugged her from behind, his chin coming to rest on her shoulder. I'll get the bed. Breakfast is ready downstairs. Go eat so you don't have to rush so much. But the last one up makes the bed, Naira protested. Not on your birthday. Anina, that was today. No wonder he'd let her sleep in. That also meant he wasn't going to concede on the chores. With a contented sigh, she rubbed her muzzle against his, shivers running down her spine as their whiskers touched. I don't deserve you. Of course you don't. But I don't deserve you either, so I think that makes us square. There would never be a point in Naira's life where she caught up on repaying all the thoughtful things Elaine had done for her in their short 20 years of marriage. In no world were they square. At least not in Naira's book. It didn't matter, though. They were happy to be indebted to each other. You know, Elaine said, his hands comfortably looped around her waist. I could probably get away with taking the day off. Assuming your class won't devolve into chaos in your absence, that is. We haven't exactly had a date in a while, and a day on the town could be fun. It's not like there isn't plenty to explore. Iris sighed. I see Enema's making a house call to tempt me to sloth today. Using my husband against me is a dirty trick. I already struggle with the responsibility, so you know I want to say yes. And say the word, and it will be done, my lady. He pressed his forehead into hers, and their whiskers brushed again. Cheater. Despite everything inside her, she knew the answer she had to give. It's a lab day today. As much as I would love to skip, I would lose ground on campus. I really should go to work. No doubt Elaine was disappointed, but he didn't let it into his voice. Then go. Birthday dinner will be waiting for you when you get home. Is Todd coming? From her shoulder, Elaine let out a long breath. I managed a brief phone call with him 2 weeks ago to remind him. He said he would try. He's probably busy. With his friends, maybe. I highly doubt he's working. Naira brought a hand up to her husband's elbow. We shouldn't assume the worst. Elaine paused just a little too long. The smile that followed was genuine, though, even if it couldn't mask. The smile that followed was genuine enough, even if it couldn't mask all of his concern. You're right. Now go eat. Yes, dear. Reaching up, she grabbed his cheek in her hand, pressing their heads together. Then she released him and headed downstairs. There was indeed a full meal waiting for her. White crest eggs on the stove, biscuits smothered in a sausage gravy beside them, and fresh coffee whose strong but pleasant aroma filled the kitchen. Important summit today at the Central Stadium, the reporter's voice crackled from the radio Elaine had left on the kitchen counter while he'd worked. The ministers of Commerce, Agriculture, Labor, and Infrastructure are all expected to be in attendance to put forward proposals for new policies aimed at handling hot-button topics like mining regulations and immigration. As usual, the meeting would require a quorum for anything to become official, but Minister of Labor Dolahan has expressed hope that more of the 13 will attend today. In a statement issued this morning, she said... The radio cracked and buzzed as Naira shut it off. Politics only ever left her in a sour mood. Representation was a joke. Hot-button topics was just polite code for, what do we do with all these nulfs? And this was the 13. They'd throw money around, act like they were doing things that made a difference, bask in the adoration of the people who thought they actually did something, and continue to grow in personal gain at Cyphus's expense. No, it was her birthday. Naira didn't need to dwell on that kind of negativity. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. A moment later, she heard Elaine power on the vacuum to clean the bed. There was no way she'd have heard the radio over the roar of Ame's handy Orem-based invention. The food was as delicious as it smelled, and by the time Elaine made it back down to the kitchen, she was down to just her coffee. Rotating his wrist, he tapped a finger against the watch she'd bought him as an anniversary gift. It was worth more than their bed and couch combined, but he adored it, so she'd never told him how much she'd spent on it. 10 minutes, Starlight. Taking one more sip of coffee, she gave a resigned nod and headed back upstairs. She passed him on her way to the stairwell and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Thanks for breakfast. You're welcome. Thanks for existing. But get going. 10 minutes is about to become 9. With a smile and a shake of her head, Naira took the old, creaking stairs 2 at a time to finish getting ready for the day. She was in a good mood. Today would be a good day. Elaine paced in the waiting room. Several sneppards in uniform gave him sidelong glances, and he forced a polite smile and gave them nods of acknowledgement. Only one returned the gesture, which was actually an improvement over the last time. Seed Mother, last time should have been the last time. Naira had been so stressed out, and tempers had run hot, and it seemed like maybe, just maybe, they'd gotten through to their son. Apparently not. A loud, buzzing sound heralded the opening of a large metal door as a guard marched to sail into the room. Elaine straightened up, taking a few tentative steps towards them. The guard on escort duty reached for Tazale's arms, which were handcuffed at the wrist. Tazale yanked away from the shorter man, lips curling back in a snarl. I said don't touch me. Just point and I'll walk. Elaine groaned. He'd been right. Tazale had not learned his lesson. The guard rolled his eyes. I was going to take the cuffs off, but if you'd rather leave 'em on. Taz stiffened, thumbs twitching in the air as his lips slicked his teeth. Without a hint of the meekness and cooperation that his parents had painfully sought to drill into their children, Tazale thrust his hands at the guard. The chain connecting the cuffs clinked against itself as he pulled it taut. Once the guard got the cuffs off, Tazale leaned into his space unexpectedly, leading the guard to flinch and multiple guards around the room to reach for batons. Tazale had a knowing grin unbecoming of his upbringing. Tazale, that's enough, Elaine barked. Now it was Tazale's turn to flinch, his eyes momentarily hinting at a shame before settling back into rebellion. We're leaving, Elaine continued, waving his son over. Rubbing at the flattened patches of fur on his wrists, Tazale moved to join him. Elaine gave a deep bow to the guard with the handcuffs. My apologies for his behavior. Thank you for taking care of my son. Beside him, Tazale scoffed. With a quick motion, Elaine smacked him in the stomach with the back of a hand. Tazale snarled, but gave the tiniest of bows to the guard. His eyes never left the guards, though, and he still wore a grin that showed no respect for the other man. When would he learn? They left the prison in silence, Elaine's thoughts preoccupied with thanking the Seed Mother that Tazale had only spit on a snop this time instead of hitting him. A pair of sneppards were seated at the bus stop. They took in Elaine in his cheap business best, and Tazale in his bright white and green jacket he'd made with his friends, and scooted to the end of the bench. Elaine gave them a friendly smile and a nod, which they only half-heartedly tried to return. At least it was something. Their timing was good. The bus was just pulling into the parking lot. Dad, I don't have money for the bus fare, Tazale said. This wasn't really a surprise. Letting out a sigh, Elaine replied, I'm covering all your bus fees for the day. Tazale brightened at this, his cocksure grin returning. Thanks, Dad. Elaine held up a hand. On 3 conditions. First, your mother does not find out about this. Work has been highly stressful for her this semester, and the last thing she needs is to have you giving her additional reason to worry. Second, you find actual work that lasts for more than a month so you can pay for your own bus fees. Third, you're coming home tonight to celebrate your mother's birthday. We haven't seen you in months and we miss you. The confidence and good humor faded as his son's face soured. She misses me, he muttered. Elaine suppressed a growl. I said we, and I meant we. Tazael simply watched the bus pull up, apparently already convinced in his own head on the truth of the matter. The lifestyle choices that he'd made after Ren's death had left both his parents worried about him. Elaine was disappointed, sure, but more so, he was simply sad to see his son intentionally making poor decisions that would only result in making Tazael's life more miserable. Truthfully, he did love his son, no matter what his son believed. What's it gonna be? Elaine asked, as the two sneppards on the bench entered the What's it gonna be? Elaine asked, as the two sneppards on the bench entered the bus through the front. With a grimace and a stiff exhale, Tazael finally made his choice. Yeah, I'll come see Mom. Nodding, Elaine handed several crystum to the driver through the open front door, then walked with Tazael to the back door, entering the bus there. Seats were easy to find this late into the morning, and they sat together in silence. Throughout the trip, Elaine tried to think of questions for his son, but he was still a bit too angry to think as clearly as he wanted. This was the 4th time in 6 months that the police had called to say their son had been picked up for something. Naira had answered the phone the first time, and her distress afterwards had been so palpable that Elaine had started the habit of rushing to be the first to answer the phone. The first time was for petty theft. Second, for getting into a screaming match with some snippered teens. Third, for aggravated assault when screaming wasn't effective enough of a communication tool. Each one had resulted in longer time behind bars and steeper fines. Elaine had sold his Stradalarian to cover the largest of the fines. He'd inherited that violin in high school as a reward from his tutor, and it was precious to him. Not as precious as his only living son. Any questions he did have were met with quick, one-word answers. You okay? Yeah. They do anything to you besides lock you up? No. Did you have a cellmate this time? Yeah. What'd they feed you? Mush. And so on. As they neared the park in District 6, Elaine reached up and tugged on the bus's stop cord. Why are we stopping? Tazael asked as they pulled up to the bus stop. We're taking a walk. Eyes narrowing, Tazael frowned. I didn't agree to that. Fixing him with what he hoped was a hard look, Elaine said in his firmest voice, I'm not asking, son. Even just that much left him with a pang of guilt. He longed for the days when he and his son had trusted each other. Still, to his son's credit, Tazael got up with him and exited the bus. The next storm day was tomorrow, so today was incredibly pleasant. The sun was warm, the path neatly swept, with the signature calls of blue jays and crimson caws filtering down through the canopy of trees. Other families walked the park, almost exclusively sneppered mothers and young kits. These gave wide berths and held their children in firm grips as they passed, whispering warnings to other families. Elaine almost missed the only other Nolf in the park. Covered by a tattered, spotty blanket, she was sleeping against a trash can. Finally, Elaine could hold it in no longer. Taz, are you trying to get yourself killed? Beside him, his son bristled. Elaine could literally smell his son's anger. What's it to you? Your mother and I are cowards, Tazael interrupted. Elaine's fingers pulled on his thumbs as he forced himself to stay calm. Are worried about you? Don't bother, Tazael grumbled. I'm fine. You're not fine, Elaine snapped, lowering his voice as a passing mother intentionally steered her kids off the sidewalk and onto the grass. You've been arrested 4 times this year, Taz. People that are fine don't go out breaking the law. Mom had the courage to. The response that came to mind was far from kind, and Elaine bit his tongue. Is that what this is about? You think breaking the law makes you some kind of hero? Yeah, actually, Tazael said, readjusting his jacket. Someone's got to stand up to these dross heads and show them what happens when they push us around. Someone with a spine. Elaine ignored the jab. He had to. He knew Tazael was trying to rile him up, and if he gave in, he'd lose any moral high ground. Son, they don't care. They're looking for excuses to put you in your place. Tazael snorted. Last snop to try took some knuckles to the face. And you served 3 months in prison for it. Worth it. Snarling under his breath, Elaine searched desperately for any remaining calm. No, it's absolutely not worth it. These people threw you in jail for a week just for spitting on them. Yeah, but that guy was a prick. Besides, he called me a native first, so he forfeited any rights to civil treatment. The cheerful calls of the birds overhead could not rescue the gloomy mood threatening to wash through Elaine. Slowly he let out his breath. Son, when are you going to learn that it doesn't matter? Tazael gripped Elaine's sleeve then, twisting it. If it doesn't matter, then Ren died for nothing, and I refuse to accept that. Elaine stared down at his son's hand, buried in bunched fabric. A bit of the fire in Tazael faded, and he let go of the shirt, though he didn't apologize. Thoughts of his lost son made Elaine's response subdued. Ren died because we live in a world where any moment not spent towing the line can get you killed. And look where it got him! Tazael snapped. Elaine glanced around, expecting to see more families avoiding them, but the park had grown strangely empty, granting them some privacy. Ren didn't listen to an officer's instructions, and it cost him his life, but he never attacked an officer like you did. Son, you are gambling with stakes we can't afford. Your pride isn't worth your life. Tazael shook his head. You don't get it. If I choose to be a Mueller like you, then I'm surrendering to a life that's just a living death. Just let it wash off, Elaine thought. He needs stability, not a tongue lashing. Taz, he said quietly, we are tiny people in a giant world. They don't care if what they do hurts us. We're beneath them. We don't have to be, Dad, Tazael said, new urgency rising in his voice. They only think we're small because we've made ourselves small. We can stand up, push back, and make them respect us. Elaine shook his head. Forced respect isn't real. It's fear. So let's give them something to be afraid of. It's better than just waiting around for someone to decide to shoot us. They want to believe we're dangerous? Let's show them that we are. Elaine took Tazael by the shoulder. You can't, son. Brushing away his father's hand, Tazael shook his head with a scowl. No, you can't, Dad. A new scent filled the air, one that Elaine was used to only on storm days, or on rare occasions from work Naira brought home. He heard the crackle of electrum a moment later. Tazael heard it too, his gaze focusing on something behind Elaine. Wheeling around, Elaine saw a group of Sneppards approaching, dressed in black tactical gear. Excuse me. Their vests read security, but Elaine wasn't aware this park had any security forces of its own. There were 8 Sneppards in total, mostly male, and half of them had drawn and activated electrum batons. Dad, Tazael hissed in his ear, we should run. Have you learned nothing? Elaine hissed back, shooting his son a glare. This is a misunderstanding, probably from an overworried mother. Let me talk to them, and don't do anything stupid. Turning back to the guards, Elaine raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. Hello. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, but we are willing to cooperate. We have no weapons, and... His words cut off in a gasp as an electrum baton was rammed into his stomach. Dad! Tazael cried. Elaine's body bent nearly in half as electricity coursed all the way from his ears to the tip of his tail. Tears welled in response to the pain, and a second baton made contact a moment later. Get the brack off him! He heard Tazael roar, before the sounds of a struggle broke out. Someone slipped something over Elaine's head, and the world went dark. Nothing was different as Naira stepped through the front door. She'd expected to be greeted with the smell of fresh dinner and a cheerful call from the kitchen. She'd even imagined that call being echoed by her son. Instead, the lights were off, and no one was home. A quick glance at the wall showed Elaine's coat and keys were both missing. He must still be out getting things for dinner. It was a refreshing change of pace to be the first one home for once. Naira felt like she was finally Naira felt like she finally had time to get ready for things at a comfortable pace. Replacing the spent Fyram crystal in the hot water heater with a fresh one, she headed upstairs and took a luxurious shower. The lab had gone well today. Only one kid had nearly lost a finger, but she'd spotted his mistake in time and rescued him from disaster. She was still tired, though. Tired but content. All things considered, it had been a good day. After zoning out in the comforting warmth for far too long, Naira finished her shower and dried off. Knowing Elaine, he'd want tonight to be a special celebration, so she picked out something a little more formal to wear. The stairs creaked as she headed down into the kitchen. It was still empty and dark. Feeling a little tired, she started brewing a fresh pot of coffee. Elaine would give her no end of grief if she fell asleep during her own birthday dinner. She did snag a quick snack, though. What Elaine didn't know couldn't defend him. The coffee finished, and she sat down with a cup to wait for her family. Dozing off halfway through her cup, she awoke with a start. The house was still dark, still quiet. The only fresh scents were of her and the coffee. Checking the time, it was nearly 1900. Another hour and her birthday would be over. Then it would be her turn to give Elaine grief. Getting up from the table, she grabbed another snack. Surely they'd come through the front door any minute now. They didn't. 1900 came and went. Then 2000 as one day rolled into the next. She dozed off and on, finally giving up at 0100 and going to bed. Morning came, and Elaine still wasn't back. What had happened? There were no messages on the answering machine, no notes anywhere in the house. Calling the neighbors didn't reveal anything either. No one had seen Elaine since yesterday. By the end of the day, panic was stalking beyond the fence of Naira's mind. A visit to the District 11 Police Department turned up nothing. They took down his name and her number and promised to file a missing persons report. That night, the truth sank in. If Elaine hadn't come back by now, something had happened. An accident, or maybe a mugging. Perhaps he'd been arrested in a different district. Or maybe what happened to Rin had come back to visit the family a second time. Sleep was torture. It brought dreams of Elaine, Tazale, and Rin, alive and well and enjoying her company, salt in the wound, as she woke to an empty bed and a silent home. It brought nightmares of Elaine in a casket, bullet wounds in his chest and head. When the sun arrived, it did little to dry out the exhaustion or dry the tears. A pounding headache accompanied every waking moment. Her body was so tense that parts of her neck and shoulders were beginning to cramp. Everything she did that morning left her within running distance of the phone. Her racing mind refused to find calm in logic, or food, or chores. She needed to go to work today. It was another lab. Could she trust the police to get a hold of her? Did she have a choice? Something crinkled beneath her foot as she made to leave. A letter had been stuffed through the mail slot and drifted unnoticed to the floor. With no postmark and her own sense of time reeling, Naira wasn't sure how long this had been present. The front bore a single name: Salatra. Tearing into the envelope released not one, but two unique scents. Strands of stray fur fell out as she removed the letter that smelled like her family. No doubt by now you've noticed the absence of your husband and of your son. We have them. If you ever want to see them again, follow these instructions. With shaking hands, Naira read on. Included on a second sheet was a remarkably detailed list outlining a location, expected security presence, and a target. It was a name she recognized only from what she heard on the news. These were instructions for where, when, and how to kill a member of the 13. How was she supposed to do that? How could she bring herself to do that? How could she bring herself to do that? She'd been in more fights than most people in her younger years. Let's try that again. How was she supposed to do that? How could she bring herself to do that? She'd been in more fights than most people in her younger years, but never before had she taken a life. The letter concluded with, "You take this to the police. Your family will be delivered to your doorstep in body bags. If you do not successfully eliminate the Minister of Mineral Resources by the end of the month, one family member will be selected at random and delivered to your If you do not successfully eliminate the Minister of Mineral Resources by the end of the month, one family member will be selected at random and delivered to your doorstep in a body bag. Continue to procrastinate, and the other will be delivered a week later. Do not fail. End of the month? That gave her 6 days. 6 days to find it in herself to kill a stranger. There was no way. Just no way Naira could do it. That wasn't who she was. She couldn't. But the letter wasn't addressed to Naira. It was addressed to Salatra, a woman dead for 20 years. A fighter, long retired, and a record lost to the past. If Naira couldn't, maybe Salatra could. It was a horrifying, sickening thought. Scooping up the stray bits of fur that had fallen to the floor, there was no doubt of their origin. She smelled both Elaine and Zale. Could she leave them to die? Or could she learn to kill? As their scent lingered, she knew she had no choice. Salatra knew how to fight. Now, Salatra would learn to hunt. Whew. That's third chapter of the day. Oh, we finally got to see the day it happened. Poor Elaine. Poor Naira, poor Tazale, the whole family. Swept up in something so much bigger than any of them. Ugh. We're making good headway. We are sitting at about 330 pages to go. Which isn't too bad. There's only 7 parts to the book, and we're in part 6, so we're getting close. Things are gonna be coming to a head real soon here. More parts and more pages? 7 parts and 1,000 pages isn't enough? It's so much. Anyway, thank you as always to everyone who showed up. Glad to have people around listening to the story. We had some new listeners for a little while, although Dr. Poggers left at some point. Maybe they went to go check out the YouTube channel and get caught up, you know? Anyway, thank you all for coming. Hope this sates your appetite a little bit for the week. And we'll pick up next time. Oh, shoot, that's right. We'll pick up next time with Tazale. That'll be fun. I'll go ahead and get his name on there. Mr. Angry Boy himself. Mr. I like spitting on cops and punching them for fun. Because I don't respect the system. Because the system doesn't respect me. I won't lie. I do love Tazale. He's not a brat, but he is. How do I? He's definitely bullheaded. And he's got a big chip on his shoulder. He's not a bully, but he is. He's got a lot of anger issues. A lot of pent up trauma. Bit of a hero complex. In his mind, he's the only one doing anything worth anything to change anything. And that makes him the best. Ugh. Anyway, we'll catch up with him next time. Anyway, so have a good night, everybody. Thanks again for coming. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.